Thing that said, take a look at what happened. These are people who work hard, but no longer have a voice. I am your voice.
The thing is that people don't give a fuck anymore. People don't care. They've already lost so much that they're willing to do whatever it takes to see America win. And I think they very much miscalculate people as Trump, as Hegseth, and so on. And they think that they will be stopped just because the leftists kill one or two of their adjacent, I guess, friendly forces or warnings, or even if their family members get caught in the crossfire. And I respect Hegseth a lot, frankly. And this is a Hegseth controlled opposition. What do you think, Hot Warrior? What do you think about that?
Salvete Legionaries. You might wonder why my mic quality is a little bit reduced at this current time, and the answer is simple. The Trotskyites have been plotting. See, they see their power base, the power base falling through a vacuum. It's all collapsing. Their false illusory hold of power is being destroyed. So in a last attempt, a battle of Berlin, so to speak, a final charge, they're attempting to mess with my comms, but luckily I currently have my special communications team in 299th Battalion. You'll never hear of it in the real U.S. military, as they are so secret that the public does not know about them, but they are currently working on re-establishing communications, and General Lance and I, General Lance is joining me here today, are currently planning our next attack against the last vestiges of the Trotskyite deep state. We are currently outside the Matrix in the real world, flying on the Nebuchadnezzar, which is another reason why the mic quality is a little bit reduced. So we're fighting the forces that are attempting to destroy all that is good and beautiful. We are fighting exceptionally hard, but now the tide has shifted, and not only do we fight in the shadows, but in the light as well, with recent nominations of Pete Hegseth, the recent re-election of President Donald Trump, and the budding heir apparent Emperor Baron Trump. So welcome again, Lance. It's been a while since I've made a video because we have been fighting hard in the shadows, but we must make a return to the public eye as well. Here we are outside the Matrix, drinking some disgusting slop because this is the real world, and it's brutal out here, but we are defeating the enemy, aren't we?
That's absolutely true, and it's good to be here. And by the way, Legionaries, same thing's happening to me. They're forcing me to drink Jim Beam. They're putting it in my mouth. They're like putting it in a little syringe, and they're injecting it into my mouth. So, oh, here it comes again. Oh, wait, hold on. As you see, Jim Beam right in my mouth to inebriate myself on this transmission. So it's been a tough fight. But in any case, in all seriousness, though, it's a very interesting turn of events in the last few, I guess, couple months. And the vibe shift has been pronounced. I mean, it's truly no small thing. And, it's just something that I never expected it to be different, especially with President Trump, Prince elect Trump at Davos, actually just basically elucidating how thorough and complete their defeat was, talking about the re-sovereigntization of the economy, of the choice of political action. It's actually pretty, very, very honestly monumentous. I mean, many people have been talking about, especially old heads, people that are not Gen Z, like myself, talking about how they've never ever had a political appointee who has had this kind of change or far reaching, even if it's symbolic, um, let's say, impulse into the world zeitgeist. And it's truly been, a huge amount of change. I mean, what's your take on this? Like, what do you feel is the change in the military and all this kind of stuff? What's going on?
Well, right away, I think what's interesting is that all the recent nominations to the Trump cabinet are political outsiders. See, most people that get the position of Secretary of Defense are highly funded by the MIC, that's the military industrial complex. So they have a vested interest in wars that do not necessarily benefit the strength of the country, but rather wars that are prolonged and use up more and more military equipment and gain the MIC more and more money over time, which is why when the Marine Corps announced their new force design, which was shifting away from static land warfare. They got rid of tanks. They started to adopt their strategy towards island hopping campaigns similar to that of World War II. I believe it was 13 former U.S. Marine Corps generals wrote in opposition to this new force design. And of course, there is a very good argument to be made, potentially, why you need to retain tanks in the Marine Corps. I don't necessarily subscribe to it, but there is an argument to be made. But these generals were not making those arguments because of the effectiveness of tanks in the United States Marine Corps. They were making those arguments because all the companies that produced those tanks were now losing contracts, billion-dollar contracts with the United States Marine Corps. And this is the same thing that happens in the highest rungs of our political structure in this country, is that most of these Secretary of Defenses are backed by the MIC. They're backed by vested interests, and those vested interests don't have the best interests of this country in mind. So, of course, even with James Mattis is now owned by the MIC, was once a great figure in the United States Marine Corps. Some people, the normies in the Marine Corps, still love him, but Mattis is a prick and a loser and a coward. I'm sorry, I have to say it. You
No, it's
know,
true. He gets
yeah.
pegged in the ass by his apparent wife, but
Is that
I
true?
didn't say that. Apparently, apparently,
Well,
I
there you
can't
go.
confirm nor deny.
Yeah, she told me over dinner yesterday. She needs
Oh,
somewhere to go when she's bored. Sorry, Jimmy. But no, but from a real perspective, having Hesketh, he's a major, I believe, right, in the Army, Reserve or National Guard. So he's not
he's
the
National
highest rank.
Guard. Yeah,
National
he's
Guard,
National
yeah.
Guard. Yeah.
But he's not like the highest rank. He doesn't have the most influence. But what he does have is he has a perspective and a will towards something that will make this country stronger, better, that will change our Byzantine force back into an elite fighting force and not just this sort of mass army of people who want free college, because that's what it's become. It's become people who just want benefits, all these losers and fat pieces of shit. He's going to change that, and he's going to bring back real PT standards the way that it used to be. I don't care if you have to, women out there in the military, I don't care if you have to smoke a pack of cigarettes a day to lose that weight. You will do it. We will force feed Ozempic into your chow. Just kidding. But but in all seriousness, having Pete Hesketh, right, somebody who's a complete political outsider in terms of military politics, you have RFK, right, who is a complete outsider when it comes to health, right? The reason why Elizabeth Warren was going ham on him during the hearing, during his appointment or nomination or whatever, the reason that they were ramming him so hard, no homo, is because all these people, your Elizabeth Warrens, all these Democratic politicians who claim to be, oh, we care about science, we care about health. No, 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 not really. Right? They don't really care about health and science. What they care about is this paycheck that they're getting from Big Pharma. And that's precisely what happened and why they were going so hard against RFK. We can look at Tulsi Gabbard. Why do so many people in the American intelligence not want Tulsi Gabbard to go in? I don't buy the, Tulsi Gabbard's a Russian plant or agent bullshit. I don't
Yeah,
buy
I
that.
don't trust that either. That's bullshit, dude. And by the way, without getting too far ahead, I'm more Indio than freaking what's her name? Pocahontas. What's her name? I keep on remembering her as
Elizabeth
Pocahontas.
Warren.
Elizabeth Warren is this Harridan type New Englander, the type that basically pegs her husband and pretends that she's a female type individual. This needs to stop, okay? Let's be real here. Like this Warren chick, she's just a deep commie, and the same tip. All of her politics, if you look at her videos that go viral, all of it is basically haranguing men in one way or another. You should do this, you should do that, and she's never done shit in her life. And at the end of the day, I don't know how to explain this further aside from you should have some very deep-seated antipathy towards this type of archetype, which is the haranguing school mom, school soccer mom type archetype. Like, it's unacceptable, especially in the military. These are not things that motivate a nation. Moreover, just to give allusion to the fact that, like, especially the army has the deepest rooted problem, which is this rot, where they attract numbers, but the quality of those numbers are very low, in the sense that they're motivated simply by college, GI Bill. They're motivated by remuneration of whatever kind, by comfort. And by the way, this is not the school of the warrior. This is not the school of the soldier, right? Hardship and deprivation is the school of the soldier. That ultimately, that's Napoleon, by the way, that ultimately it's better to retain a smaller number of soldiers in the military that are higher quality than it is to maintain a higher, or at base, let's say, at level, strength level of the military that is of lower quality. And that's that's the challenge that we're facing, right? Is that at the DoD is we're thinking that every single person is a one for one quality individual fighting in the warrior. I guess the soldiers. I guess I don't even know how to say it. Combat force is the same. It's not. It's not at all. And luckily, Hegseth is going to change that. And I apologize, Warrior. I know they've been injecting Jim Beam in my throat, and so I've been a little
Of
bit.
course.
I'm a little bit south of the border in my let's say elocution in my
Just like a lot of people are going to be soon.
Oh, exactly, exactly. They've been injecting me, but no. But let's, in all seriousness, though, like, I think Hegseth, the reason why it's important that we pick someone who is not a general level individual, and you see a lot of these generals or ex-generals or individuals who are associated with the military-industrial complex, which is a real thing, by the way. If you ever go to Crystal City, which is the city adjacent to the Pentagon, it's Raytheon, it's all these private military contractors, and they have, what they do is they approach these generals as they're, ingratiating themselves in the puzzle palace, which is called the Pentagon, but I like calling it the pentagram, right? Because it's demonic. And at the end of the day, you have to understand one very simple thing: that anyone that reaches to a general level of basically a general, whether it's brigadier all the way down to 4-star, basically has no further, let's say, career prospects. And their only career prospect is by selling their ass to all these private military contractors, which they give. Obviously, I can't back this up because they game the system in such a way that if you make accusations in this way, you can get sued. But it's called basically a legalized kickback, in which, for instance, the Bradley system, the entire system of development, the R&D project of the Bradley, was brought through the Pentagon through a series of different generals. And the reason why it took 10 plus years to basically make this weapon system is because the generals wanted to make sure they were getting as many kickbacks from the various different private military contractors, where it had to do with the TOW missile, whether it had to do with things as simple as the steel requisitions from China, or whatever it may be. And so when these generals pay very close attention, when they retire, they don't retire in the American tradition of basically, a private citizen. They're not at all involved with the military institution as a whole. They are a private citizen, like Cincinnatus. That is, generally speaking, what is acceptable of the officer corps of the United States military, is that you retire, you go into a civilian industry if you want to, or if you're a general officer, you have more than enough to retire and be quiet in your, retirement. But a lot of these people, especially General Peg Me in the Ass Mattis, they are directors at certain Raytheon director panels, and the reason why they're directors is because during their time in, they made certain deals or certain mutual understandings that if they chose a certain contract from a certain place, that they would get promoted or hired at a certain place. And so this needs to stop. And the reason why Hegseth is so important is because Hegseth never received any of these kinds of favors or gave any of these kinds of favors, even though he's highly, let's say, qualified for this position. I mean, he went to Princeton, for fuck's sake. I mean, he's a high IQ, highly capable individual. It's not like he's an idiot that rolled out of a double wide trailer park, which is what they're trying to make him out to be. You know, he's a true patriot. He doesn't stand to gain from anything. In fact, he stands to lose a lot of personal wealth. And frankly, you know, if you see what they're trying to do, recently there was a helicopter, quote unquote, crash into a passenger line that I don't know if you saw this, Warrior, but basically the helicopter wasn't at first, it was trying to smash into two different planes before it finally reached a third and crashed into it. And this is what the leftists do, is basically they kill people as a kind of warning to patriotic elements of any given nation. And the thing is that people don't give a fuck anymore. People don't care. They've already lost so much that they're willing to do whatever it takes to see America win. And I think they very much miscalculate people as Trump, as Hegseth, and so on. And they think that they will be stopped just because the leftists kill one or two of their adjacent, I guess, friendly forces or warnings, or even if their family members get caught in the crossfire. And I respect Hegseth a lot, frankly. And this is a Hegseth controlled opposition. What do you think, Warrior? What do you think about that?
Well, the whole idea of most of the political class obviously being representatives of an economic elite is the general trend that we're pointing out here. Like I said, it goes from Hesketh to RFK to Gabbard, right? The deep intelligence state in which you see a largely stagnant foreign policy from Clinton to Bush to Obama. You'd say, well, that doesn't make any sense. These are politicians that are supposed to be from opposing political parties. How come the for our foreign policy, our defense policy, our intelligence policies are all largely the same? That's because there's a very deeply entrenched bureaucracy behind a lot of these things, and intelligence is one of them. And with Gabbard, you have somebody that's willing to expose a lot of the practices in the past that have been, I believe, detrimental to this country and that have allowed a stagnant bureaucracy. Lance calls them the Trotskyites, so we can use that terminology here. This bureaucracy that has had a long control of the behind the scenes of this country. Essentially, when you allow a bureaucracy to fester, you don't get our best at the top, right? You get these people who are comfortable. You get these people who are used to getting their way through bribes, and lobbying is essentially a bribe. Okay, that's how you get away with corruption in a
Right.
democracy. It's through
It's
lobbyists. It's through super
legalized.
PACs. Yeah, right. And that's, I mean, one of the rare times I'll sort of agree with the left is something like the whole deal with Citizens United, right? Um, the difference between the left and us, because sometimes we'll have parallels when it comes to thoughts on economic policy. They want changes to the economic policy to make everything fair. We want changes to the economic policy to not allow these ugly, fat, disgusting bureaucrats continue to be in power, right? Because essentially, when you get a stagnant political system that's essentially, you know, going to the highest bidder, you're not going to get your best. You're not going to get eugenic population at the top. You're going to get a dysgenic one. BAP talks about this and actually and why India had such a big cultural decline over the past 2,000 years, and it's because the castes instead of marrying for things like beauty and valor and virtue, they started marrying for economic incentive and
Yep.
economic concerns.
Yep.
Um, but besides this, going back to the topic of this video, and we're talking about the new Trump golden age and what that entails. Right away, I would summarize it with Hesketh, RFK, Gabbard. These are all people being put in these positions to actually do things on behalf of the American people, on behalf of our country and the strength and power of our country, rather than on the behalf of a very small cabal of people with that use their economic power to increase their own wealth and to increase their own influence over the American political system. Like I said, it's big pharma, it's the deep intelligence state, it's the
Yeah.
military industrial complex. All of them are fighting for their interests. And before I pass it off to you, this is what Schmidt talks about with his critique of democracy devolving into factionalism. You have all these factions that are all representing that faction's specific interest, whereas in a total state, right, a good total state, because there can be a bad total state, obviously, but in the good total state, you have factions that are not working for their own benefit, but each faction, each guild is finding a way to better strengthen the country. So when you have a strong central leader, ideally what happens is instead of the factions all trying to worm their way into the political process to represent their interests, they're finding out how can we retain or gain the sovereign's favor through us benefiting the sovereign's state, which is, I think the ideal uh, sort of real politic is to have a strong central leader that sort of dictates, did you do a good job? Did you not do a good job? Rather than all these people that can essentially buy out whoever the sovereign ends up becoming. And then there is no appeasement towards somebody with the better interest of this country in mind. Instead, they're all just trying to fight for their own interests. And that's largely what's been the case with American politics for I don't know how long.
Yeah, look, man, like at the end of the day, people don't understand that it's a false paradigm to think right versus left. This complete absurd a false paradigm brought on by the 1789 revolution, the communist revolution of the French Revolution, right? The ideal is that the sovereign, the Caesar archetype, balances the interests of the elite with the interests of the body politic. One cannot survive without the other, and we saw this in Rome, where basically one side becomes too rapacious, whether it's the Gracchi who favored the interests of the body politic at the expense of the elites or the optimates, or vice versa, where the optimates completely, executed the, I guess the leaders of the body politic, the Gracchi, literally cornered them in an alley and pelted them with tiles. This is a true story. You should look it up. And vice versa, where the late Republic was a culmination of that, right? So the Marian Sullan Civil War, the first Civil War, was one where the people fought against the elites. Sulla won, the elites won. However, the true synthesis of these two that creates a truly dynamic and robust state is when we're able to make sure that, for instance, the interests of the elites are preserved, not at the expense of the body politic, but to their benefit. And that's what Trump should represent, is effectively a golden age is in which the elites are able to prosper and everyone prospers, right? So if the elites are able to be unshackled from the completely absurd and stupid regulations that the left has exacted on the elites, and then vice versa, the elites are also bridled in the sense that they have to also cultivate the body politic of the American people. And this is not a new thing. The reason why Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, and so on were known as heroes of captains of industries because they weren't simply simple, let's say, oligarchs or magnates. They were ones that were investing into the actual American people. In their time, it was investing in public libraries, in public education, in things that would up bring up individuals of promise from the body politic, cultivate them, investing in them, to make America great. And so it's not one against the other, but rather, can we function as a team? And I think that Trump represents, maybe not in so many words, a marriage, an ideal marriage between the two, where, hey, the elites are given, the freedom and the, let's say, the latitude of action in which they're able to achieve and attain those goals they set out for themselves. Because let's be honest, Elon Musk is a great man. Like, we can't deride him of that.
But at the same time, we have to understand that Elon Musk, hey, bro, like, hire and invest in Americans, right? I mean, that's the idea. And so it's not necessarily about left versus right. And this is why I love people like RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, and other individuals, is that they understand this. Like, hey, it's not necessarily about one, it's not about the lower versus the higher, it's about the whole team. So, like, okay, elites are good, elites are not a big problem, but make sure that the elites are investing in America, and make sure the people that are part of the body politic are playing ball. They're not just simply extracting very petty and short-sighted labor, I guess, mafias against the industrialists. And when we're able to work together, that's when excellence is happening. And if you think this is a bullshit, think, for instance, of the prisoner's dilemma, right? Where basically you have two prisoners, and let's say your boys got into a fist fight at the bar, right? And your boys fought these other boys, and they're both being basically interrogated and said, oh, you better give information about the other guys, because blah blah blah. And the code is that you give nothing. And the reason why you give nothing is because if both parties, even though if you're enemies with both parties, the ideal outcome is that everyone gets let off, because you don't work with the police, in that circumstance. And so you get the excellent outcome, right? Which far exceeds any alternate outcome, which is, okay, if I inform on the enemy doesn't inform, I get way better off outcome than they do. But the thing is, in a modern capitalist society, is that both sides understand this, and what they do is they choose to inform on each other, and nobody wins, everybody loses, and the house wins. And so the secret is the Caesar outcome is making sure that everybody wins. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, or if making myself understood, Warrior, but does this make sense?
I understand what you're saying, though. To simplify it for the audience is, we should all go to the casino and cheat the casino or something.
Yeah,
No,
that's right. It's
um,
like Casino or Goodfellas.
we're gonna do an Ocean's 11 heist and take all the money or
That's
something.
right. That's
But
right.
um, but going back to specifically, the prospect of a Trump golden age, because that is the topic of conversation. We've outlined the basic structure in terms of who's being put in what position and why this specific person is good for that position compared to the status quo. Well, let's think, well, how is this going to bring about the golden age? So, of course, the Hesketh nomination and appointment to Secretary of Defense is going to revitalize the military. For the past 4 years, Austin Butler, is that his name? Austin Cuckler, the previous Secretary of Defense, initiated these radical leftist reforms against quote unquote extremism, and it's all this bullshit. They define extremism essentially by that which is right wing as opposed to left wing. So of course, many people were unfairly persecuted by that administration. Some of my friends as well, persecuted by that administration for having right wing beliefs. Meanwhile, you have people, military service members who are literally, trans or communists or out doing these, BLM protests or whatever, who are getting away with jack shit. In my opinion, if you're going to kick people out of the military for being at Jan 6th, you should kick people out of the military for also being at a BLM riot you know
I mean,
um
it's self-evident. And I mean, the military culture is that you're completely apolitical, and the fact that over the last 20 years or so that you could get away with leftist activism while in the military is a refutation of everything that the military stands for. And so, if we're going to be hard handed with one, we should be explicitly hard handed with the other. Otherwise, it gives rise to what's happening now, which is a partisan military, which is not what it's supposed to be, ideally, or at least ideally in the sense of what the founders had
Sure,
anticipated,
in
or
liberal
rather,
democracy.
exactly.
In our ideal, Hezgeth is going to get rid of all the communists, and we're going to staff the general staff with hard right wing
That's right,
ideologues who are going to
chuds.
revitalize. Yeah, I am not for a depoliticized military, and Lance isn't either. We are for a politicized military. We're just for a politicized military of the right,
Which is
the true right.
also, by the way, where we lose, because we think that depoliticizing the military somehow makes it more effective. It does not. It actually
Yeah,
makes it ineffective, and
it makes it
therefore,
Byzantine.
yeah, it makes it. I mean, first of all, you don't attract. I mean, especially if you have a leftist military, you don't attract the best talent. But second of all, you don't make it integrate with the campaign, because remember, as Clausewitz said, every war is an extension of the political. And so if you have an apolitical military, well, my friend, what you're doing is robbing it of 75% of its effectiveness. And you see this with the wars stemming back all the way from Vietnam to the present, or actually even further to Korea to the present. And ultimately, to have a depoliticized military is completely false and a non-starter. And to say that it's a leftist military would make it rob it of all of its combat efficiency, because all of the virtues and values which actually make a military effective are one and the same, not or are completely antipodal to what leftists believe to be like the true values of life. I mean, it just completely runs counter to the nature of existence as a whole. And so ultimately, it's about balancing those two interests. But at the end of the day, it's an absurd take to think that the military should be depoliticized. But it's doubly folly to think that it should be a leftist politicized organism. I don't know if that makes sense, Warrior.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, this is another reason why I don't believe in liberal democracy is if you're going to be at war, you need everybody behind the war. You need everybody behind the objectives of the war. And again, it always goes back to Schmitt in his critique of liberal democracy. But without this unified vision for a country, which is essentially extending the power of the state, the thing I like to mention all the time is that every single state up until maybe the Enlightenment, right, was a right wing state. Every single state was a right wing state. So
Well,
you could
by
be
by its very
apolitical.
virtue, it has to be.
Yeah,
That is what the state is at its base is the military.
right. But what I'm getting at here is that most of human history is dominated by what today would be called right wing politics. So I am apolitical in the sense that we should just go back to everybody having this political ideal of excellence, right?
Right.
Which was essentially what it was. So
Be
whatever your state
careful.
was,
Be careful. You might be an extremist to think
well,
that people should be excellent.
I don't
Absurd.
think I think there's a good Mishima quote about extremism that I would say now if I remembered it. But be something like be that, or maybe it wasn't Mishima, but someone else. Somebody says something like be that which the liberal considers an extremist, or the bourgeois considers
Oh,
an
that's
extremist.
Evola. Yeah, yeah.
Is it Evola? Yeah. But most of human history is dominated by a right-wing political orientation. So nobody ever talked about politics until maybe the Enlightenment or whatever, there was no politics because every state was fighting for their own virtue, their own interest, their own greatness, right? Their own strength, their own power. That was normal, right? So this whole depolitization is very antithetical to the natural drive of humans, which is essentially fighting for your own interests. There's been a lot of tweets recently which were interesting, or not tweets, but there was this one guy, total chud, but he did speak right on this, and he says, "Well, I don't vote for things that go against my own interests, right? Because that's essentially what the leftist is doing. The leftist is voting for things that will replace them, right? They're voting for things that are essentially going to end any possibility of their future bloodline. In fact, they're willingly ending their bloodline. They're willingly not having children. They're willingly not continuing their their own essentially the extension of themselves, because essentially what having a kid is, it's reaching out to eternity, right? You're attempting a sort of immortality of the blood. And even if you don't have kids, you're doing other things to help people around you so that the future of your tribe, let's say, continues on, right? Or the future of your country. You're doing something for some future, right? Whether it's literally your own and your children, or if it's the children of the nation, right? Everybody plays a role, but the whole leftist orientation is literally voting against your own interests. You're voting to be replaced. You're voting to give up what you have for other people. And look, I hate the boomer mentality, of course, of like, oh, I'm not going to help my kids, oh, I'm going to keep my money, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to hoard it all. Like, I don't believe in that. But see, where I would, my socialization is a socialization of making everybody stronger for the purposes of making my state stronger. And leftist socialization is equality merely for the sake of equality. It's equality for the sake of, oh, I'm a weak little ugly thing and I can't be strong. So I think that the ideal is that everyone at base should be like me, right? So that's why
Right.
with this recent article trying to make fun of these rich, wealthy Republicans or whatever. They were trying to say, "Oh my gosh, it's the mean kids" or whatever.
Hmm.
But the reason why this article was written is because these are good-looking people, good-looking men and women having a good time, dressed
Oh
nicely,
yeah, the
people of
cruel
success.
kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Cruel Kids Club. This whole thing is that these people cannot get into the Cruel Kids Club. These people cannot be beautiful. These people cannot be successful. These people cannot have their moment under the spotlight, under the sun. So they have to say, well, actually, this isn't cool at all. This all this bullshit leftist media literacy. I mean, you see it with Fight Club. Oh,
Well, it's
actually, Fight
Nietzschean.
Club's not
Yeah,
cool.
it's Nietzschean ressentiment. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know what you're
exactly.
talking about. Yeah, it's a slave mindset, and that's what's absurd to me is that the leftists, they deride what is unattainable, and instead of seeing it as beautiful and something to give homage to, like for instance, look, I'm never going to be the most smart, most intelligent, most beautiful, most jacked guy on the block, but to have someone that is an object of emulation and therefore inspires within me, incites excellence. That is the purpose behind competition, and the excellent is not necessarily that maybe you won't attain that, but to do the opposite, which is what the Khmer Rouge did, and communism does in general, is called tall poppy syndrome, where the tall poppy is cut down and only the low poppy exists, the defunct and the destroyed, the mangled form of life, which is also wrong too, right? So that's what I think most people don't appreciate, is that ultimately the way to win is by, first of all, cultivating the highest poppy, and by imbibing in those who might not be the tallest poppy, to give homage, or rather see that as the pinnacle of excellence to strive forward to. People who have a weak will, or are kind of mangled people within, they'll never allow that, because they feel as though just because they can't attain it, they must tear it down. And you can see this in leftist ideology, is that it's all about, and it's not about in America either, though you can see it in America, it's about the whole world over time. It's just about tearing everything beautiful down. But the inverse is also true, whereas the high can be tyrannical over the low, and it's about balancing the I guess the balance between the two, right? It's basically understanding that it's neither about the complete tyranny of the higher, nor is it the tyranny of the low. It's about the balance, the healthy balance of the two, in a synergy, in a teamwork. And I think that's something that we miss, where we exist in this, I guess, libertine or liberal revolution 1789 paradigm, where it's about, oh, you're better than me, you should be torn down, you're just evil. And it's like, no, neither is it that the object, but it's also the idea that we should inculcate in the higher, in the elite, this leadership mentality that we're supposed to bring up the lower. And this is the idea, or the ideal behind the kingship, or the leader of a nation, is to not necessarily revel or be a petty tyrant on your very, I guess, low hill, but it's to raise all boats. High tide raise all boats. It's to be the high tide for humanity. and still be that pinnacle of excellence for everyone else to attain or try to strive towards an attainment for themselves. And of course, no one's going to be, no matter how hard I try, I'm never going to be Elon Musk. I'm never going to have the naturally endowed gifts of 150 plus IQ, multi-million dollar endowment for my family. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and cut his heels just because, I'm never going to attain that. So, fuck him. No, no, no. That's the wrong mentality. It's not one or the other. We work together and we succeed together as one team. It means sacrifice on our end, and it means sacrifice on his. So that's the challenge that I think the future has. And most people are so self centered, so pettily self-interested, that they're willing to see the whole world burn and choke on radioactive ash rather than admit their shortcomings and understand and seed a certain type of self-sacrifice, which again comes down to discipline, right? And the dichotomy of discipline vice freedom. And, obviously, this is my own take. I don't think freedom is in and of itself as formulated by Aristotle, the idea that the individual lives by self formulated rules or ideals, I think is bullshit. I think ultimately what that leads to is anarchy in the sense of an anarchy of values. However, I think ultimately, if you want to create a polity or a meta-organism, which is what a nation is, a meta-organism who extends and is revivified and exalted, made full of life over generations. What it requires is a certain level of teamwork and a certain level of, basically the elite taking care of the body politic and vice versa. It's not one or the other. I mean, that's my personal opinion. Warrior, I don't know what your personal opinion is, but that's mine
Is
personally.
Gentile in the room with us right now? So I
He's
think I
always
hear
he's always
Gentile
in the room.
speaking.
He's always in the room.
I think Gentile was like possessing you for a little bit
It's
right
okay.
there.
It's okay. It's okay. I channel spirits a little bit. It's okay. Yeah.
No,
Yeah. I might speak
obviously,
in might riff off in Italian a little bit. No, anyway, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I obviously agree, but going on from that, I don't want to stray too far from the topic, right? But of course, I agree with everything you're saying, and I think going forward, yeah, it is important to realize that competition is good, and tyranny is the opposite of a monarchy. Monarchy, and I'm using this term very loosely, right? Not
Yeah,
to be
go
a
for it. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
specific system, but just in general, the idea of somebody at the top, or let's say an aristocracy in general. The ideal is not tyranny. The ideal is to have an arena where the best attain positions where being the best can benefit the state, can benefit the strength and the power and the beauty of the state. So somebody like Musk, for instance, if he's able to succeed in his goals of colonizing Mars, that's something very beautiful. That's something very functional for the future of humanity as a
And it benefits
species.
us all. I mean,
Yeah,
to say nothing, of course, whether he succeeds or not, I mean, it functions in the fact that it inspires people and inspires coming generations in achieving great things. And you see the opposite happen in communist countries. So, for instance, the Soviet Union or China, where people of great ambition are basically systematically smothered. And this resulted in what's called the Sovietization of man, where IQ actually visibly depreciated over time because systematically it's derided, or excellence of ambition, excellence, the very thing that catalyzes excellence of man is disincentivized, even if it's very petty or very small, because what happens is basically over time you punish people who dream big, and that is a huge mistake, and that is the very antithesis of what America should be. America should be this basically arena. And to riff off of what Warrior was saying, the Greeks had this concept of the agon, and everything revolved around the agon. But what is agon? The agon is the competition arena. It's the place in which man, it's not simply, sports arena, but it's very similar, right? So if you were a potter or if you were some kind of artisan, you didn't simply make things for its own sake. You made things to be the best at that thing by competition. And this extends to everything else. It extends to the realm of the political. It extends to the realm of shipbuilding, to philosophy, to and this is where we get the rivalry between Socrates and the Sophists, and we have everything else and everything in between all throughout society, and this is what characterized Greek culture, and actually is the very motor by which Greek culture became great, is because of this very idea of the agon, the competition. And remember, it is by no means a coincidence that the agon is similar to the word that we have in English called agony, which means suffering, and like suffering in the pursuit of something, right? Passion means to suffer in the pursuit of love. But all great things come through pain, and that's the very sadness, or rather the lethargy of our time, is that we're such slaves to comfort, where we're not willing to run towards pain. And this is one of my central messages with Lance Legion, is that ultimately, if you want to attain greatness, if you want to attain the fullness of life, you have to run towards pain. You have to build your cities on the side of Mount Vesuvius, just like Nietzsche said, because that's where you'll be able to get the fullness of life and imbibe that. And of course, maybe you'll um, edge to edge, my gooners out there, they'll edge too close to the sun. But the thing is, ultimately, what is it like to be, you know, I guess, a man in the arena versus the spectator? And, Theodore Roosevelt wrote about this. He wrote Man in the Arena. It's better to have tried and failed than to be the cold and pallid soul, to have simply been a spectator of life. And that ultimately America is not about being a spectator to life as it happens, but rather be an actor in it, or an actor in its competition, and to give fullness and meaning to life by simply the attempt and the pursuit and the combat of what life is, to experience the agony of life and therefore the excellence it renders. I'm sure, like, this probably sounds a little bit schizo, but I mean, Warrior, I mean, what do you think about that kind of concept? I think that's what we're kind of held hostage by, is this slavery to comfort. And this is why bourgeois society is so anathema to true life as a whole. I mean, I was just in Europe, and the Scandinavian countries, they like, yeah, everything works, and say what you want about the immigrants or whatever, but like in general everything works and whatever, but it's so smothering and feminine, because everything feels like you're inside of um, a fully functioning Swiss clock on the wall. And if you even deviate a centimeter beyond what is acceptable, you get absolutely pounced on by the state, and people see that. And I don't want that for America either. I don't want you to be simply a cog. I want you to be a disruptor and full of life. And organic life is not a cog life. You're not supposed to do what other people are telling you to do. That's, I think, the beauty of freedom, and absolutely the central meaning of what it meant to be free in America in the 1800s, was that basically, yes, of course, you had certain parameters around that freedom. You had certain, um, I guess, let's say, like left and right lateral limits, but it's not like what you experience it in Europe, which is like you are nothing more than a faceless cog in a hopeless machine, and you're nothing, and you were born nothing, and you will be nothing. And I think that ultimately the future belongs to America, because ultimately America is the perfect synthesis between both. It's basically freedom where it meets freedom with duty, with discipline. And within that, I guess, synthesis, you see human excellence flourish, For too long, we've had too much false discipline, which is basically the tyranny of communism, but also it was a over, let's say, overreaction from the tyranny of the barons, right? The robber barons who were just here to get theirs and make themselves rich, and that was it. I don't know if I'm making any sense here, but you let me know, Warrior. Jim Beam is a little bit, he's trapping my tongue. He's doing a little bit of judo on my tongue. So go ahead.
My meta spirit understands. My material body is attempting to catch up a little bit, but I do get
It's
the
okay.
general gist.
It's okay.
No, I do understand what you're getting at, and the whole hope of what Trump can bring to the table is that we are in a spiritual neurosis in this country, and we have been for quite some time. And what he invokes is this new hope that we can get back to this sort of ideal of duty and this ideal of conquering frontiers. Because for too long, we've demonized the conqueror, we've demonized the powerful, the strong, the beautiful, and this is the whole orientation of the left and things like body positivity and all the trans stuff. It's all a celebration of ugliness and a demonization of beauty and power. All the BLM stuff, et cetera, et cetera. It's all putting people who are not doing anything in life and who are actually doing bad things in life on a pedestal and trying to make them out to be heroes. That was
Yep.
the whole BLM thing. That was the whole body positivity thing. Oh, look at this big fat whale. She's proud to be a big fat whale. Let's celebrate her. No.
Yeah, but
Um,
even Lizzo ended up on Ozempic, didn't she?
Honestly,
Interesting.
At least Lizzo could sing. I'll give her that. At least she could sing, and she was a funny fat bitch who was trying to lose weight. So I can respect her for that. But uh, Ozempic nationalism now. No, but what Trump brings to the table is this revitalization of aligning ourselves with the natural. And what is natural? What is natural is that which wants to be powerful, which seeks power, which seeks beauty. And America has fallen from that, and we've started to demonize conquerors. We've started to demonize, the history of conquest, which is a history of beauty and vitality and insurmountable odds, succeeding over insurmountable odds. These are no longer our heroes. Our heroes are no longer the Achilles of the world. Our heroes have become the MLKs of the world. Our heroes have become the downtrodden. And of course,
Yeah.
you can trace this back
Pathetic.
to
It's
some degree.
pathetic. It's pathetic. Yeah, no, so go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say you could trace this back to some degree, to essentially biblical times, or not biblical times, but New Testament times, and essentially this fight between Caesar and the early Christians, for instance, right? And of course, many of our friends will disagree with us, but this general trend of worshiping the downtrodden, right? Of worshiping he who is not on the top is the trend that uh, becomes the psychological uh, manifestation of or the leftist is the psychological manifestation of this worshiping of that which is lower, that which is oppressed, that which is weak. And what Trump offers is this return to a vision where we revel in power and greatness and beauty, where we actually reward beauty. Let's just look at how his staff looks like compared to the previous staff. Look at RFK. I mean, I get he takes TRT, but the guy's like 70. Come on, he looks great for a 70 year
Yeah,
old
he's
on
jacked.
TRT.
He's more jacked than
Yeah,
I am. Yeah,
it
let's
was
be honest, dude.
they had like a freaking trans, man, or I guess woman, whatever, that was the in RFK's position before. I mean, we have like Pete Hegseth, who's an absolute Chad, right? He has like what, 12 children or some shit, maybe not
Yeah,
that many, but
virile,
shit ton of children,
virile.
three wives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Like he's a Chad, he's a good looking guy, Tulsi Gabbard, my heart goes out
Went
to
to
Tulsi.
Princeton. Yeah, he went to Princeton too.
Yeah.
No, no, it's true, and I mean, it shows in actuality. Like, I think people they fall into this paradigm where it's like, oh, my ancestors were losers, and therefore I must be a loser by consequence. And it makes sense if you're trying to do this, like, basically tactic by attrition, where okay, we'll use those suckers of humanity to bring down the elites and then become an elite of our own. But it never works out, right? I mean, look at Zimbabwe, look at all these communist countries. Ultimately, they fall victim to the very ideologies that they profess. And even if you're a half-hearted ideologist and a communist ideologist, it always kills you in the end. So the secret to overcoming yourself and to becoming great yourself is not by falling victim to communism or ressentiment in the Nietzschean sense that, oh, I was kept down by the man, and so I can't be the man myself. No, it's by being the man and being basically unimpeachable, being so like completely full of capacity and capability that you're just basically unignorable. And the reason why it's important, because words mean things, ideas mean things, and even if it's the case that in spite of yourself, you profess an ideology which is contrary to the very essence of who you are, so as an excellent man or woman, ultimately it catches up to you in the end. And you see this, for instance, in China, for instance. Mao Zedong, he was a great guy, but the thing is, his cultural revolution and his ideals of basically, the working peasant and the working man ultimately brought down China for the longest time until finally, like Xi Jinping, basically, I guess, in every word but fact, you know, denounced what was leftism, leftist communism, and the idea that no, actually excellence is good, and that ultimately what was the problem with the Qing dynasty was that it didn't give a fuck about its body politic. It treated them as peons as opposed to treating them as who they should be. So, this is where I think there's a false paradigm, and it's informed by the leftists, where it's like either you're a conservative or you're a leftist progressive. There's a false paradigm there. And like ultimately, you can be a rightist in the sense that you can be an excellent person devoted to excellence and understand that life is dynamic, organic life. I mean, that's who we are, humans are as a whole. We are a becoming, we're not a being. And therefore, as becoming, we can devote ourselves to higher ideals. And over generations, we become those higher ideals. But conservatism is a dead end, it's a cul de sac. And then when leftist progressives call progression, what leftist progression is basically the progression of a cancer, of death itself. And you can see no further than, for instance, communism, what it's wrought on humanity as a whole, whether it's from the Soviet Union or the Khmer Rouge. It's basically a dead end as well. And there's a secret third option, which you are, let's say, uniformly and universally, let's say, disincentivized from pursuing. But there is a third option, which unites both the good and both the good of both sides and denounces the bad of both sides. Does that make sense, Warrior?
Yes, and unfortunately, the Trotskyites have just attacked our ship, the Nebuchadnezzar.
Oh,
So Lance
oh,
and I are going to have to report to battle stations and fight off these bug people.
good to go.
But to the legionaries out there, thanks for tuning in. Thank you for support. Obviously, it's been a bit since I've published a podcast, but we have some big newses coming soon to you. So be ready, be on the Twitter sphere, be on the YouTube sphere, eat your slop, and prepare yourself for some great events coming up. But yeah, the Trump golden age is beginning, and I have hope for the
That's
future. I
right.
know Lance does, and we're going to continue to build this project and support the sovereign and prepare for the Emperor Baron Trump. I can't wait for one day. I'm going to make that meme with Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai. He's like, he says, it's the very end. He's talking to the Emperor. And he's like, simply say the word, and I will gladly give my life. I'm going to make that meme, but like with Baron Trump instead of the Emperor of
Honestly, that
Japan.
movie makes me cry. Like nothing
Yeah,
is
very
more
based.
necessary than the warrior ethos. 100%.
Indeed.
And hey, thank you, warrior. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate that.
Indeed, of course. And as always, legionaries, continue fighting, continue training, and prepare for glory. But as always, this is the warrior philosopher building the foundations of the warrior philosophy. Ave Caesar, Ave Nova Roma.
Away.